Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What Do You Mean You've Never Seen, a podcast that explores and analyzes prestigious and popular films that one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Jonathan Colon, and I'm joined as always by my co-hosts, Jennifer Branch.
Hi, everyone. How are we doing today?
And Max Abelman.
Hello, everybody.
How you guys doing? Happy to be here?
Pretty good. I don't know. I'm worried I might be coming down with something. I'm a little tired today.
Oh, is it dance fever?
Maybe.
Well, we might have more cowbell somewhere.
That's exciting. Thank you all for joining us as we discuss this week's film, Iron Man.
Ooh.
And Jennifer is watching this film for the very first time this week. So
Yes.
Let's get right into it. Iron Man was released in 2008, directed by Jon Favreau, written by Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby. That's
What
a
a
fun
great
name.
name.
Yeah, right?
Sounds like a soap opera character. And it was the very first Marvel Studios film released by Paramount Pictures back before they lost the Marvel universe to Disney. And starring Robert Downey Jr., Terrance Howard, Jeff Bridges, and Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yes.
In one of her very few mainstream film appearances. This movie obviously has a tremendous amount of cultural significance because it is the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It all started here. The Marvel company took out a giant loan to form their own production company. They produced this film independently and then Paramount released it. And based off of the strength of this movie, which grossed $585 million at the box office back in 2008 off of a $140 million budget. This launched the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was the first film to really start a cinematic universe type franchise. You know, movies had never crossed over before in this way, and it was really groundbreaking, and it was a tremendous risk. I think it's a pretty good film.
Why do you think it took so long for Marvel to even start making movies?
Apparently,
Because I mean, how old is this intellectual property? Like from the 60s, 70s?
Yeah, about that time. The Marvel company went through a real bad, back in the 90s, comic books in general took a real tumble. They weren't as popular as more digital media started becoming available. And they sold off the rights to their most popular characters to Sony and... I forget who they sold. 20th Century Fox is who they sold the X-Men to, and the Fantastic Four. So they didn't have any A-list properties left.
Yeah. X-Men was already kind of a thing at this point. Iron Man.
X-Men was
like the Hugh Jackman X-Men.
Yeah. All three of the original X-Men movies had already been released. They were into, at this point, doing the First Class era. They did First Class and then Days of Future Past and all that. So they had a lot of these B-list characters, but they realized the characters that they still had control over eventually could make up the Avengers. So they decided to test it out with Iron Man. Shortly afterward came Iron Man 2, then Thor, or The Incredible Hulk first, then Thor, and then Captain America, the First Avenger, and then the first Avengers movie, which blew the roof off comic book movies and started this whole juggernaut that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become. And I think there's 26 movies now?
Sounds about right.
Probably one just came out yesterday,
Yeah.
There could be one coming out tomorrow.
Now they're releasing 3-4 movies a year.
Yeah.
Just a quick description of what the plot is. Tony Stark's a millionaire industrialist who is definitely not Bruce Wayne. And he gets kidnapped by this terrorist organization called the 10 Rings. They want him to build them a bomb. He instead uses the equipment they give him to build a structured suit powered by a fictional thing called a mini arc reactor. Builds this miniaturized arc reactor. There's a giant version at Stark Industries that powers the suit and also prevents the shrapnel that he got hit with when the terrorists bombed his convoy from reaching his heart. So he builds the suit, he escapes, he decides he wants to stop making weapons. Then he fights with his father's old partner who wants to obviously continue making weapons. He eventually defeats the terrorists and has to fight his old mentor.
Who built his own suit. And over the course of the movie, he builds a second suit and then a third suit that are more and more advanced. And then he can fly and shoot lasers out of his hands. And it's a pretty exciting, quick moving plot. And lots of explosions. Yeah.
It's a very explosive movie.
From the very jump, the first explosion that kind of a little bit threw me off. I kind of saw it coming, but, it did surprise me too a little bit when he's trying to take a selfie. But
I have one question before we get into anything else. Like, what is actually his condition, or like, is there valves missing in his heart? I couldn't understand.
So when you see that a bomb explodes basically right next to him when he's hiding from the terrorists, and shrapnel from the bomb gets into his chest, goes through and he's wearing a bulletproof vest, but it goes through it anyway. And those fragments are in his body, working their way into his heart.
Okay.
So the original crude magnetic device that Jensen builds for him draws the shrapnel away from his heart.
So it's just in there.
It's just in
somewhere floating in the cavities of his body.
In the bloodstream, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
That was always my understanding, at least.
Correct. And so yeah, that's your brief plot description. Hopefully everybody's up to speed. And now we're going to get right into what we knew about this movie before we watched it. We're going to let Jennifer give us her thoughts and impressions prior to viewing, since you're the one who hasn't seen it yet.
Okay, so as I said in the last episode, this was pretty much what I figured the plot would be, like how he became Iron Man. I knew he was like a rich guy. I knew he had the Gwyneth Paltrow assistant. I knew he talked to his house or intelligent Jarvis, whoever that is.
I totally thought you were going to say house elf. His house elf.
His house elf Jarvis. I knew all that, and I figured I knew he was going to get injured in some kind of way, which like caused him to have whatever condition that he had, because I knew he had the missing thing. Because like I said, I have seen a couple of the Avengers movies with him in it, but I just didn't know like what his original background was, how he got there. That's pretty much what I expected for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Max, did in your rewatch of the film, were there any recollections that you had that were accurate or inaccurate?
No, I've seen this movie so many times. I remember everything about this movie just because, you know, every time you go to a new Marvel movie comes out or whatever, you do a rewatch, or if it's new Avengers, really. You don't have to rewatch Iron Man for everything, but for like Avengers stuff, yeah, sometimes it's fun. Plus, the pandemic was really long. We did a couple of Marvel full rewatches there, so yeah, I remember this movie pretty perfectly. Nothing new.
The thing about these franchise films, particularly like the Iron Man series, or like even going back to like the Superman movies or the original Batman movies, is that sometimes over time, you know, when you've seen the movie and its sequels a bunch of times, you start to forget which like action set piece or which plot point was in which movie.
Right.
It's like, oh, does Tony Stark do the Montreal Grand Prix in the first one or the second one, like that kind of stuff. But I think this movie has a solid enough plot, and it's very straightforward. The action sequences they make a lot of sense, and they follow a real distinct pattern. It's not like he only fights one. I mean, unless you count Obadiah Stain, he really fights one villain the entire movie. The 10 Rings are the 10 Rings are the bad guys. It turns out that Jeff Bridges' character is involved with them, but it's not like it's not a movie that has two super villains or two competing villains or anything like that. It all makes sense. Everything he does is related to the initial incident that causes him to become Iron Man in the first place. And it all ties together. The plot is very, very tightly wrapped up, and it's a very good, solid plot. So let's just talk about our general thoughts and impressions on the movie. Was it an interesting watch, and what stood out about it? We'll start with our first-time viewer. What do you have to say, Jennifer?
The one thing I have to say about Tony is he likes to talk in t-shirt slogans. So that was kind of fun. I mean, at first I was like, this guy's kind of a jerk. He's a womanizer. He's, you know, like trying to be James Bond, but like not as cool. So there was that. But then he kind of won me over with some of his quips. I wrote down specifically like, I'm hungry, give me some scotch. I thought that was funny. But yeah, so I liked his relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow. I felt it was like very organic. Like it didn't feel like it was rushed or they didn't know each other. I feel like a lot of times in these superhero movies, I'm going to give an example of like Aquaman, where I felt like Aquaman and Mira just had zero chemistry. They didn't really know each other, but then they're kissing all of a sudden. It made no sense. But in this one, you know, they had a relationship. They had chemistry. I liked them together. I liked that she, you know, was cautious and kind of put him in his place.
I agree. One of the things I really like about this movie is that they don't get together in the end.
It's hinted at.
Yeah.
It's like you can see where this is going.
But they don't quite, like, they're about to, and then she's just like, yeah, remember when you just, like, left me at that party? Okay, bye.
Yeah, she's still challenging him. Yeah. I like them together.
Yeah, I like that they didn't just try to force them together at the end. They were like pretty realistic about it. It's just like, oh yeah, but you were still a jerk to me like yesterday.
Right,
so
and a lot of times
we're gonna wait on that.
A lot of times in superhero movies, it's like there's all this nonsense going on, all these like big high stakes situations. It's like, if you were really in this situation, are you really worried about like, taking somebody on a date? Probably not, or you shouldn't be. So
right.
I thought it was interesting that they didn't really like play up their romance like too much. Like I felt like it was an appropriate amount.
Yeah, and I think they have a really good, particularly, they use her very well in this movie. She's a very practical, pragmatic character. She's obviously not like head over heels for him at any point in the movie. She kind of like, you could tell she's kind of like irritated by him. It's like she has to take care of like a babysitter.
Right.
She has to do things for him that he should be able to do for himself.
Send his girlfriends away.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And, she has to keep him on schedule because he doesn't pay attention. He leaves for Afghanistan 3 hours late and she's like, come on, let's go. You could tell she's irritated by that, but she still likes him. She still cares about him. And she's a really good assistant. And she actually serves a very important role in this plot. She's not just like, oh, there's a girl here because every superhero has to have a love interest.
Right.
Yeah, and it's always really fun to see her go, and it happens sort of quickly too, to see her go from like, okay, I'm done with this, I'm going to quit. Okay, but I still care about you, and I do want you in my life. So yeah, I'll just do a little bit of fun espionage, and then that just sort of snowballs from there. Like she goes to takes the files from the computer, then Agent Coulson, then they're being chased, and then they have to go find Tony. They can't find Tony, so they go in a... It's like it all snowballs from there. It's really great to see her like very quickly become a part of that action.
Yeah, and she's very cool.
She is.
And she puts on a great face. That's a very intense scene. And I mean, it's been forever since I watched it for the first time, but you can let us know what you think about this, Jennifer. When she has that confrontation with Obadiah Stain in Tony's office, the first time I watched that, I found it incredibly intense.
Yeah.
Because because this guy is like psycho. So you have no idea what he's going to do.
Right.
Like he could just pull out a gun and shoot her right there.
Well, and it's hard to say. I mean, at least for me watching it, I didn't get the impression like how much she actually knew about this situation, how involved she was in like, I kind of felt like Tony's like, this is what you have to do, just do it. And she didn't necessarily know exactly what it all meant. She was just kind of following instructions. So, if he was going to try to get information out of her, would she have that information and what was he going to do? I mean, the other thing going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, I appreciated they didn't also go through the trope of, oh, she's like just like a nerdy, let me put a ponytail in, but oh wow, she was beautiful the whole time. Like she pretty much stays the same throughout. And I think Tony, is meant to like her from the beginning, but it just kind of grows with how he sees how much she actually like cares about him and isn't there just for a job.
Yeah, she's dressed and costumed and with her makeup. The movie knows that she's pretty. She's a very pretty woman. He sort of like notices her a little more when she's wearing the backless dress at the charity event they go to. But the movie doesn't pretend that she's an ugly duckling.
Right.
Which is kind of always an irritating trope when they're like, oh, look, she's wearing overalls and glasses. So she's ugly. Like
nobody convinced me Sandra Bullock was like, what? You're pretty? You're like, oh, okay. Because she had sweatpants on. All right.
Yeah.
Because Lord knows pretty women have never ever worn sweatpants. Right. But yeah, I really liked her character throughout. She really, like I said, she really serves an important function in the plot, and she's not a damsel in distress either.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated. She doesn't get kidnapped. I mean, he does go and he prevents her from being killed, but she's there to arrest him.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of Obadiah Stain, she's there because she's figured out his plan, and she went and got the authorities involved, and she's coming to get him, which is super unusual for a superhero movie. Usually how many times has Lois Lane been kidnapped?
Right. Or even at the towards the very, very end when, she has to set the roof bomb off or whatever it is. She's the one that puts it. If she wasn't there,
he would have been
killed. Yeah. So I don't think she's his equal as far as like, obviously he's the, genius or whatever. I don't know that she's totally clued in on everything he's doing or like what it all means, but she knows enough to listen to his instructions and know exactly like what she's supposed to do when she's supposed to do it.
Yeah. Super like modern version of a female superhero movie character. And what do you guys think about the length, the pace, and the action of this film? Were you excited by it? What do you think?
I mean, I have to admit, I think all Marvel movies are a little long, so this kind of felt a little long to me too. But I mean, the story was interesting. It moved along well. Like I said, I think I'm just getting sick because I got a little tired towards the end.
Yeah, I don't know. This is my 1000th time watching through this movie, so it does feel a little bit long, but I don't think I felt it was too long upon my first few viewings of it. I wouldn't say that there's anything unnecessary in it, like it doesn't show you anything you don't need to see or that they could have gone through faster, I don't think.
That's true.
I've always felt that the first third of the movie, which is the part where he's in the cave with Jensen and they're building the first Iron Man suit.
We could have seen less of that.
It feels a little long to me.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you start to feel like maybe this is what this whole movie's going to be.
Yeah.
By the time they finally get out of there, it's like, it's kind of a relief that section of the movie's over because you want to see him be Iron Man. You don't want to see him be sick and in the cave in the dark and being threatened by the terrorists.
Right.
And it does seem that they had like maybe one too many instances where the terrorists came in and threatened them.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't necessary. And like they switched, like the lead guy changes during that period.
Right. Like once we got what was going on, like I don't think we needed more repetition of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the only part of it that I feel maybe takes a little bit longer than it needs to, but the rest of it moves really quick for me.
Yeah.
I love the part where he goes back to the village and kills all those people.
I have a question about that. Like, how fast does this thing move? Is it like, I mean, how fast does he get there? Because it seems like he gets there in like 5 minutes.
Well, the suit is capable of supersonic flight.
Okay.
So I would imagine in like maybe 4 or 5 hours he could get from, because he's coming from Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, okay. Malibu, right?
Yeah, going to Afghanistan. So I'm imagining like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like the same as when you used to be able to take the Concorde from New York to Paris, and it only took like 2.5 hours.
And he doesn't like pass out from going so fast, or
no? I guess that's the science fiction element.
I was gonna say, I guess I have a lot of questions about like the science of it, which probably is kind of silly on my part because it doesn't add up.
The science is magic, and that's kind of how Marvel works, is that magic is science and science is magic, and you can achieve anything.
Right.
Anything
well, that's what's interesting about movies like this, though, where he doesn't actually he's not Superman. Like, he doesn't have superpowers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's using technology, so it's like, I guess I kind of maybe want it explained a little more, as opposed to just like, Superman is like, well, he's an alien. Like, there's no need to explain any more than that.
Yeah.
But, because it's like, they're trying to make it sound like, well, this is science. And so it's like, but is it though?
Industry.
Technology.
Well, and I mean, I kept writing in my notes every time they showed a cell phone that I'm like dying laughing, because it's like, he's got this crazy high-tech suit and all these robots working for him.
City.
And then it's just like a flip phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how technology in the Marvel universe was light years ahead of everything except
the real
for
technology,
cars and cell phones,
right?
And everyone drives Audis in the Marvel
universe.
There's
a lot of Audis.
True.
Maybe it's that product placement again that we don't know anything about. Hey, Audi, if you're out there, we'd love a sponsor.
Right?
Yeah.
Or there's a Bentley in it too. I would love to be sponsored by Bentley. All right, I do want to talk about Obadiah Stain, because, dear God, is this not the most obvious villain in the history of movies?
Oh my God, I literally wrote the first time I saw it. He's like, he reminds me of somebody in Indiana Jones. He was very much just like, well, yeah, obviously this guy's the bad guy. Obviously this guy's going to double cross you. Well, why would you think he wouldn't?
And his name is Obadiah Stain.
His name is Stain.
Yeah.
He walks around with a cigar in his hand.
But rides, what is it, that contraption that he rides around the Stark Enterprises?
A Segway?
A Segway.
Yeah, he rides
a villain on a Segway.
Yeah,
what is that about?
Weird.
I
I mean, he was like, I guess the point is like he was friends with Tony's dad, so that's why Tony trusts him. And to be fair, especially like the first half of the movie, or well, not even the first half, but the beginning of the movie before he starts actually becoming Iron Man and starts having more of a conscience. I mean, Tony's kind of a jerk too. Right. So, attracts like, I guess. So maybe that's why it wasn't as obvious to him, because he was kind of self-involved.
Yeah. I also think when this movie, on a side note, was more closer to the time when Segways were about to take off before they didn't really ever take off. Because,
that was even before this. Segways, that was going way back when they thought Segways might be popular.
That far back, but they were about to get big for a while, and then they just never did because better stuff was made. Then hoverboards happened. It was toast for Segways.
Mm-hmm. But going back to my original, trying to remember what my first viewing experience of this was, which was probably 10 years ago. The second you see him on screen, it's like, oh, this is the bad guy.
Right.
Like I think they maybe telegraphed it a little bit too much. And he's very clearly...
I mean, there's other guys in it that you think are maybe also going to be bad guys that turn out to not be bad guys. But there's no way that this guy is not a bad guy. Yeah, at first, maybe when Agent Coulson shows up, you're like, who's this character? Maybe and I've seen other movies that he's in, so I know he's not a bad guy. But even still, if this was your first Marvel movie, period, you might think I wonder what his deal is. Maybe he's going to double cross him in a different way. That doesn't mean that you also don't think that Obadiah is the main bad guy.
Yeah, he's very clearly the main villain. As soon as he's on screen, I don't recall thinking, he's in league with the 10 Rings, but he clearly is going to be the one that Tony has to fight in the end. One more character I want to talk about before we move on is Colonel James Rhodes, aka Rhodey.
Yeah, I thought
portrayed in this movie by Terrance Howard. And do you know, Jennifer, that this is Terrance Howard's only appearance in this film? His only appearance is in this film. And later on, he's played by Don Cheadle.
Okay, I do remember either maybe you told me or maybe I had just heard this, that character gets played by someone else later, but I couldn't remember the details of it. And I didn't want to look it up because I try not to, when we're watching these movies, especially when it's one I haven't seen, I try not to Wikipedia it because I want to go in with fresh eyes. I don't want to learn more about the movie as I'm watching it. I want to kind of wait and share my thoughts and then when we talk about it. So I didn't look it up while I was watching it, but I do remember you telling me that. And he's also one that I thought was maybe going to turn out to be a bad guy by the end of the movie.
I think by nature of who plays him, because Terrance Howard plays a bad guy in so many movies.
Yeah.
I mean, he was even the bad guy with Queen Latifah and Steve Martin. What was the name of that?
Bringing Down the House.
Bringing Down the House. He was the bad guy.
Bringing Down the House.
I have not seen Bringing Down the House. Oh my God, we got to do that on this podcast. It's so good.
It is.
Is that a well-known movie?
It's a what?
Is that a well-known movie? Is that a popular movie?
I think it is. I think it had its moments.
I think it's one of Queen Latifah's more popular
I've never heard of
mainstream movies. He does almost seem like he's kind of sinister the whole time.
Right.
Not as bad as Obadiah Stain.
Right.
But later on he will be played, in all his future appearances in the MCU, he's going to be played by Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle, famous for The Golden Palace.
Yes.
His most greatest role.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So if we ever meet him, if he ever comes on this podcast, we probably will review an episode of The Golden Palace.
I can't wait.
It's going to be so exciting. All right. Any other thoughts about the movie before we move into our next topic?
Yeah, I got nothing. I didn't take any notes on this movie. I took 4.
Okay.
Yeah, just the main thing I wanted to bring up is just the one other part that I wouldn't say it dragged because it didn't happen long enough for it to make the movie drag. But there was just a lot of nonsense jargon that I was just what are you saying? I think at one point he uses the phrase fuselage integrity, which what does that mean? So that was where I was a little bit, okay, I don't know that this is for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of tech talk.
Yeah.
Particularly during the segments when he's building the new suit. And I don't know if these are even
real words or if it's just like you said, made up technology. So there was a lot of jargon in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely helped to have the closed captioning on as we have for most of these movies. Because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't catch before that I did catch this time. All right, so Jennifer, we're going to talk about eyebrows now. What do you think of the eyebrows in this movie?
I wanted the suit to have eyebrows. And I was a little disappointed that it didn't.
Okay.
And that was Other than that, I mean, so my main thing with the eyebrows is usually when it's a period piece, that's when I find them distracting, when they're wrong for the time period, and this one is obviously not a period piece. It takes place pretty much when it's supposed to, or when it was filmed. So everybody looked normal and well-groomed and nice, but the suit should have eyebrows.
Now, do you think Gwyneth Paltrow looks better with the red hair than she does with blonde?
Okay, so I was confused. Did she dye her hair halfway through the movie?
No, it's supposed to be red the whole time.
Okay, because I could have sworn maybe something was off with the color in my TV or something. Because it seemed like it wasn't as red until she was wearing the backless dress, that scene. And I was like, did her hair get redder? It looked more red in that scene. Overall, I like her with the more red hair. I feel the blonde washes her out. She's very pale already. So you don't want too much yellow flesh tones on screen with her.
Yeah. I prefer her with the red hair. It's too bad she doesn't have that all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about whether or not this movie lives up to the hype. I want to ask Max first, because we've asked Jennifer a lot of questions. Yeah. She's the new viewer. Do you think this movie lives up to its cultural hype status?
Yeah, I think it does. It's Iron Man. It's exactly what it says it is. It's a superhero movie. It was the first one that was really able to do all the things that it needed to do special effects wise, to where it actually seems like a real thing. You don't have to imagine your way through it at any point. Yeah, it lives up to it. It's got good banter and it's got good action, and it does its job.
What do you think, Jennifer?
So as far as the hype, I don't know, at least not from what I've heard, that this one is hyped up any more than any of the other Marvel movies. I don't know that it's necessarily anyone's top favorite one, or that it's, in the pantheon of all the Marvel ones, that it stands out amongst. From what I understand, it kind of seems like it's a decent, it's definitely not the worst one, but I don't know that it's considered to be the best one. So I would say, yeah, it lives up to the hype. It's, it's world building. So, it's maybe not going to be by design the most action one, because it's establishing the beginning of the narrative. And so I think it does what it's set out to do. And I think as far as, this isn't one where people come up to me and they're like, oh, you've never seen Iron Man. I don't feel like it's on that level as some of the bigger Avengers ones. So yeah, I'd say it's about where it should be as far as hype goes.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a smaller story, and viewing it now through the lens of having seen, Avengers Endgame and Eternals and all of these world calamity plot films. This is a very small plot. It's sort of probably one of the more realistic, which is weird to say because it's a man flying around in an iron suit. But but the conflict and the impetus of the story is a very real life thing.
Right.
Obviously, the Ten Rings doesn't really exist, and it has a real big history in the comics that we'll get into probably when we do future MCU movies. But it's like a real world thing. It's something that, if the technology existed, could legitimately have happened. And it doesn't deal with aliens or interdimensional beings. It's a very straightforward story that sort of makes a fantastical element out of real life, which I really think is good. And I do think it is by far the best of the Iron Man movies.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
And possibly, I think I enjoy it more, and I think it's a better told story probably than even the Incredible Hulk movie, or I kind of also I like it more than the first Thor movie.
Okay.
For me, it's about on par with Captain America, the First Avenger.
Yeah, I would say even less happens in the first Thor movie, but we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
He has shorter hair. That's the important thing. So yeah, I think this definitely was a good enough movie, and it told its story well, and it built its universe in a very subtle way too.
Yeah.
They aren't hitting you over the head with, this is going to be an expanded universe type thing like they do when other film companies and other stories have attempted to start building a cinematic universe because they saw that this was so successful. For example, when they started trying to do that dark universe with the universal horror characters, or even with Godzilla versus Kong, they kind of hit you over the head with the fact that this is going to be a thing. Right. There's going to be other people in it. There's other characters. They don't talk about any other characters, and Nick Fury doesn't show up until the very, very end.
Yeah, I'm glad I was about to get up and leave, and I'm like, oh no, wait. I'm sure that there's an end credit scene.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's
the nice thing that I just recently discovered, forgive me viewers if I'm like late to the party, but it seems that now Disney Plus has a listener who are people who are looking at their phones while listening to this.
Hostages.
Oh no, not hostages.
Okay.
Disney Plus has a feature now where during the credits you can skip credits to go to the post-credits scene.
Oh, okay.
Which is really nice because mad respect to all the people that are in the credits, but I'm not actually reading any of that. I read like the big credits during the, immediately following the end of the movie, but I'm not sitting there and finding out who the fifth grip was and all that stuff.
That being said, if you were the fifth grip on this movie, come on our podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we want to hear from everyone who could possibly have had anything to do with movies.
Yeah, right. If you were a grip or a best boy, or if you were
or if you're one of those babies that was born during the production. If you're a production baby, I want to talk to you.
Yes. Do you get like some kind of like a commemorative film cell?
For this? Yeah. I don't know.
If you are Robert Downey Jr., please come on.
Oh my goodness. Or Robert Downey Jr. Sr.
Oh yeah. Love to meet him.
All right. So would you recommend this movie to your friends or to your enemies?
Well, definitely anyone who's interested in any of the Marvel stories. Like you were saying, the other Marvel movies I have seen, even the ones that were focused on a singular character, because I have seen a couple of the Thors actually, and I've seen, I think, the first Doctor Strange. They all have intertwined characters in them. And this was the first Marvel movie I had seen that Iron Man is the only one in it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a good establishing one. I've also heard there's a different way to go with watching the Marvel movies, and that's to go in like chronological order. And I know a few people who did that and they prefer that way. But I feel like this is the way to go in release order because like you said, the Nick Fury thing, it's like, I know that maybe Captain America takes place first, but I feel like you need this one to establish the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. thing before you go back.
Yeah, and Iron Man 2 actually has a lot more establishing stuff with S.H.I.E.L.D. that it makes everything else make more sense. Because like they're obviously not going to reestablish S.H.I.E.L.D. in Captain Marvel or Captain America just because it takes place first. It's like, no, we've already told that story. Like, you just have to jump in midstream and just say, oh, this is what it is, and just go along with it. So I do think, I agree that watching them in release order probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense for, like, getting the information you need to know at the time you need to know it for the next movie also. Like, sure, you could watch Captain Marvel as the second Marvel movie that you watch, but then you're not going to need any of the information you gained from that movie until another 20 movies or so.
Right.
Same thing if it's your second watch of the cinematic universe, I could definitely see that would be an interesting way to do it. But I feel like if you're starting from scratch, like I am for the most part, I mean, I've seen, like I said, like maybe 5 total. I think probably this is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to move on to What Do You Mean You've Never Seen Awards?
My favorite
Everyone's favorite part of the show. All right, Max, is this movie better than the Muppet movie?
You know, I don't think it is. I kind of like the Muppet movie better. You know, Iron Man is good and all, but he's just not my favorite superhero. He's not my favorite to watch. He's not my favorite to read either. I don't know. There's like heroes that are like fun to watch and read for me, and Iron Man, Captain America, all of those sort of ones. I just don't find them as interesting as like some of the more, like Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy, those sort of characters sort of read better and I identify with more than like,
some rich bachelor.
Yeah, some rich bachelor or ultra patriotism. And like Thor, I find Thor very unreadable as a comic book just because he talks ridiculously and in all caps all the time and I just can't get into it. It's the same thing watching it. Like, they're just not for me.
Right.
I don't find them fun.
The important thing to remember is that Iron Man does not feature Gonzo crashing a hot air balloon into a car.
Exactly.
I mean, and again,
exciting action.
I don't see any songs in this. Although it did start with Back in Black, which was kind of cool. I did like that.
Yeah, the AC/DC Iron Man, commingling is always fun to watch.
I actually did like that. I take back what I said about the no good songs, but I mean, I could have used a lot more Miss Piggy in this.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Miss Piggy is Pepper Potts.
Oh my gosh, I would watch that movie.
Absolutely. All right, Jennifer, name something you like better than this movie and one thing you like less.
Well, this movie I feel like is easy to compare to other Marvel movies that I've seen and liked better. I liked my favorite Marvel movie so far that I've seen is Thor Ragnarok. I think it's like the funniest one.
That's a good one.
And so I did like that one better than this. Something I liked less than this movie was The Princess Bride. I can't get over how much we really didn't like that, you guys. And I'm sorry. And I talked to Jonathan and Max about this. I feel like it was a bold move of us having our first movie that we put out be a beloved movie that we did not like.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to get haters from that.
I don't know. The response has been pretty good, though.
But I'm still not over how much I really just didn't care for that one.
Yeah, it's just, it boggles the mind, that one in particular.
Yeah. I think it's our new metric for what is a bad movie, just like the Muppet movie is our metric for what is a good movie.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've seen worse movies than The Princess Bride, for sure.
And I've seen better movies than the Muppet movie as well. But there are like standard good movie and standard bad movie.
Yeah, Muppet movie is definitely like a B+ to an A movie. So if you're better than the Muppet movie, you're really, really good. Yeah. A lot of things are worse.
Muppet movie being always watchable and Princess Bride being never watchable.
100%.
And for our listeners, I don't think we've ever really explained this on air. But the reason we compare every movie to the Muppet movie is a famous story that my mother loves to tell about how her sister came home she was married at the time, with her husband from seeing the Muppet movie in the theaters, and told my mother and my grandparents that it was the greatest movie that has ever been made. And my grandfather, who is like the most agreeable, just like, oh, let people think what they think. And he was like, oh, come on.
I mean, to be fair, though, the only person I've heard this story from is our mother, and she might be getting the details wrong.
Oh, probably.
But anyway,
but
we think it's assault. I
feel like our father was there, and I feel like he did confirm that story.
We do on this podcast genuinely like the Muppet movie. It's a little bit of a joke, but we do like it.
Well,
so that's kind of, and we like Max said, we always want to watch it. If anyone's like, do you want to watch the Muppet movie? None of us will ever say no.
Right.
So that's how we kind of came up with that. And maybe we'll cut this out because maybe it's funnier if people don't know why we're doing this, but I don't know.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if the details of that story are correct. Pam, if you're listening, you can email at us at what do you mean you've never seen
at gmail.com.
Email us from upstairs.
Yep.
All right, moving on to our next award. Who won this movie and who lost this movie? I'm going to ask Max first.
Okay. I think Tony Stark won this movie, and I think, what's his face? Obadiah Stank lost this movie, yeah.
Yeah. See, I
this
disagree.
isn't a hard one.
I think Terrance Howard lost this movie because imagine how much money he would have made if he had.
Did we get into? I know we talked about it, but why was he not asked back for any of the movies?
It's one of those things where you hear different things from different people. Sure. Supposedly, he was paid more than Robert Downey Jr. for this movie.
Really?
Because he was sort of, he had been in like Hustle and Flow and like he was like a star on the rise. Mm-hmm. And Robert Downey Jr. was very much down in the dumps when it came to his popularity because this was after he had been to rehab a bunch of times. He'd been in jail, I think, at some point. Yeah. So he was like a risky move. Like this was not like, oh, we're going to get the most popular actor in Hollywood to play that. If they had, they probably would have picked Tom Cruise. But Robert Downey Jr.
I would not watch that.
No, I wouldn't either.
But Robert Downey Jr. was a big risk. And, plus, nobody knew whether he was going to, stay on the wagon. And obviously he's gone on to tremendous success. And we're very happy for his rejuvenation of his career. But apparently Terrance Howard was paid more than him for the first movie. And then he wanted more money for the second movie, and they said no.
Right.
There's also, I've heard some rumors that he was difficult to work with or that he didn't get along with Robert Downey Jr. I'm not sure. I don't, there's no definitive reason why, but man,
So the casting director was just in bed watching Golden Palace like I do during the evenings and was like, yeah, let's get this guy. I mean, it was probably between him and Cheech, and
Well, and it's pretty crazy that he went straight from Golden Palace, did nothing, and then did Iron Man 2. And then look at him.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
That's like 20 years, man.
Nothing
That's so
happened
crazy.
in between.
Yeah.
So for me, Pepper won the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like she.
I think so.
We talked about her already, but she was very capable. She saved herself. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a good feminist character. I feel like so far on this podcast, the female characters have been a little lacking, except for in Gone with the Wind. But in this one, she had agency. She was smart. She was capable. She was doing her job well. When she thought that things were going wrong, she was going to quit. Like she totally takes control of the situation, and
she's not
I have a lot
codependent,
of respect
for sure.
for her. So for me, it was Pepper that won the movie, and the guy that lost the movie was probably that guy that was trying to take a picture with the digital camera that got blown up in the truck.
He did.
He was the biggest. He didn't even get to take the picture.
No,
just got
it's a
blown
shame.
up.
He should have stopped messing with the settings.
Yeah. You waited, you snooze, you lose.
Yeah.
You snooze, you explode.
I hate it when that happens.
Let's rate this movie. All right. I'm going to ask Jennifer, rate this movie 1, how out of how many? 5 out of however many unexploded bombs.
Unexploded bombs.
Landmines. How about 5 landmines? All right. I'm going to give this I would say about 3 landmines. It's not like the greatest movie I've ever seen. Like I said, I feel like it did what it was set out to do, which was establish and build the world. And you obviously need this movie to go on to some of the other bigger movies. I liked Nick Fury at the very end. Samuel L. Jackson, right?
He's always a win.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, why am I second guessing myself? I know it's Samuel L. Jackson. One thing I did want to bring up, what I think is always interesting about Marvel as opposed to like the DC universe, although the DC universe sometimes does this too, is that these people do not hide their identities. They are very much, that's me. I'm Iron Man. And it's just so funny to me. It's just an interesting way to go, because it's like, when he's not in the suit, he's gonna be vulnerable. But, he tells everybody it's him. And this would be an outfit that nobody would know it was him, unlike Superman or even Batman, where, like, obviously that's the guy, right?
Right.
Like, he has total anonymity, and he chooses to expose himself, which is an interesting thing to do.
And Marvel is sort of like that in the comics too. A lot of the identities are known, except for like
Spider-Man is not.
Spider-Man is not known, even though it's sort of an ongoing joke where
it's obvious.
Where it's very obvious that Peter Parker, like, I think right now in the Spider-Man world, Peter Parker owns Oscorp and is getting advice from
spoilers,
Spider-Man.
Max. What are you doing?
When are you planning on reading a Spider-Man comic? I don't know, but it's really funny when he shows up and when people like talk about him, and some people know his identity, but it's just like, nobody knows you, even though everybody should.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of become a trope of the 21st century with superhero. I don't know if it's necessarily like this in all the comics, because I don't read comic books. Nothing that there's anything wrong with them. It's just, that, like I've said before, that medium is just not for me. Like, say, for example, like even in the DCEU, everybody knows who everybody is. Basically, Lois Lane knows that Clark Kent is Superman, which I gotta say, I kind of like this new trend, because you have to suspend your disbelief and just think that these characters are stupid.
Right.
To not know that the person that sits next to them at work, or even worse, they're in a romantic relationship with, is not also this other superhero character, especially in cases of like Superman, where it's like, it's the same face.
Right.
It's just he puts glasses on.
Right.
And even by the time Iron Man came out, which was sort of the first real superhero movie, the secret identity concept had already been worn out by like every other movie.
Yeah.
Like, we're already
too much of a trope, and they decided to not do that, which is good. Even though, like I said, they could have easily gotten away with it, because Iron Man, like, you don't know that that's Robert Downey Jr. in that
You
outfit.
don't even know that it's actually a person.
Or a man. Anything.
It could be a robot.
Yeah, but we don't really need another, like, oh no, my identity movie. Like, no one really cares.
Yeah, that's been kind of refreshing with the Marvel movies in particular, is that you don't have to go along with the ridiculous notion that the people that are closest to them in their lives don't know who they really are.
Yeah,
Right.
and like, you know, the Spider-Man movies did do that a little bit, but like even that is not like a major plot point because whenever someone needs to figure it out, they figure it out.
Right. Although in the original Spider-Man movies, Mary Jane gets kidnapped like all the time.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Tobey Maguire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
I
she
feel
gets
like we have to
kidnapped like
watch
twice in one
because
movie.
I don't know that I've seen this.
Yeah, she
all the
gets
way
kidnapped a lot, and I don't know.
Ugh, and she's wearing that like Asian dress. That
Ooh,
it's
problematic.
yeah.
Yeah,
That was a
there's
style at the
some
time.
stuff.
There's some
those
stylistic
movies.
choices in those movies that I'm not on board with. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm going to give this one 4 landmines out of 5 because it is, again, a very simply told story. It feels like it could be real. It's not super fantastical. It involves technology that I don't understand, but I also don't understand like how the space shuttle works.
Sure.
So like I can live with
Yeah.
that.
Right.
You know,
You can
it's more
gloss
believable
over
to me
it.
than like Doctor Strange's magic. You know,
Right.
that you really have to suspend your disbelief. How about
Right.
you, Max? How many landmines are you going to give this movie?
A 3.5. I give it like 3.5s with like a bonus. What does that say? Stark on it. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not. You know, it's not my favorite superhero movie. When it came out, it didn't actually get me into the Marvel universe, and I didn't keep up with it until many years later, at least 2 Avengerses later, until I started following it again. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. But after you're into it, it's fun to look back at it and then go through the Marvel universe, but it's not like a hook for me.
Before we finish, I did want to bring up a couple points that my son had while watching this. One, he was very concerned about the dog, wants justice for the dog that got killed in the desert. And the other...
No, I don't think that was a dog. I think they were calling the man a dog.
That's what I was wondering about, too.
Yeah.
Were they calling the man a dog?
They were referring to the man as a dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And his other theory is that Coulson covered up D.B. Cooper, which we could probably go for hours on that. Interesting theory.
I mean, do we... Because in the
Does
Marvel...
it happen already and I just don't know about
No,
that?
in the Marvel universe, it tells you who D.B. Cooper is actually one of the characters. I don't know if you want that spoiled for
I
you.
don't
So,
care about
yeah.
spoilers.
Okay.
All right. So we've given our landmines. We've scattered our landmines where they may. And now we're going to move on to our final thoughts and feelings about the movie. Is there any other stuff any other notes you had that you wanted to bring up? Anything you wanted
There
to
was
say?
so much broken glass in this.
A lot
Just
of
glass,
broken glass.
everywhere. Just so much glass. Just everywhere you step, there's glass. And poor Gwyneth Paltrow in those heels trying to walk on glass. I felt that.
Yeah, those were like at least 3-inch heels she was wearing.
Those were
Yeah.
hardcore heels. And she's literally just walking over. And the glass never gets cleaned up, even in his own. And that's the other thing. He's testing this suit in like his garage with all his fancy cars. Like, can't he just go out to the desert or like, a storage unit or something? Like, why is he testing this technology around all his very breakable stuff?
I think he's tied to his computer system and the AI.
That makes sense.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the suit gets fabricated below the garage, so
Okay.
he's got like the super 3D
But he
printer
never
down
cleans
there.
up the glass. Like, it's still on the
Yeah,
ground.
that
Wait,
like
You
works-
never see anyone cleaning up that house.
Yeah,
ever.
that workshop gets progressively trashed in small ways, and it's kind of fun to see like the car that gets destroyed is just like still sitting there destroyed,
Right.
and they're
And
like
you know,
kicking
like
it around
days
more.
have gone by. Like,
Yeah.
they had time to clean it up, and there's just glass everywhere.
Yeah.
Tony
Kind of
Stark
insane.
obviously does not need a clean space to work.
Right.
He does not mind a mess.
Right. But a lot of
Yeah.
geniuses are that way, so.
That's probably
makes
true.
sense.
What about you, Max? What else do you have to say?
I think the only note I have that we didn't cover is slide transitions.
Oh,
That
yeah.
slide
Lots of
transitions.
slide
that.
transitions.
They slid out of that scene. It was so much fun. It
Is
was-
that, I felt like that stood out to me because, like I said, I've only seen a handful of Marvel movies. That's not something they continue with,
Yeah,
right?
that's not done
Okay.
anymore. That's a relic of older movies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's a very early 2000s.
Yeah.
Right.
It does kind of date the movie a little bit.
Right.
A little bit.
That and the cell phones.
Yeah.
And the cell phones, yes.
On the cell phones in Stanley as Hugh Hefner, everybody.
Stanley.
That was interesting to me, too. I wrote that
Yeah, him
down.
playing like an actual like person that exists. Him doing a Hefner
I thought that was
impression,
funny,
which is
too.
he didn't say or do anything.
He was just like,
stood there.
"Ah." He looked very confused, which he probably did in real life.
Yeah, I mean, he
Yeah.
does look like Hefner, so it's
Yeah.
good casting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the only other thing is I don't feel like we really talked about Tony very much, but
He's fine.
He's fine.
Well, I just like his T-shirt.
But again,
phrases.
I feel like, and no slight to Mr. Downey Senior, Junior, Senior, it does kind of feel like he's just sort of playing himself.
Right.
So it's like, and that was like I said in the teaser from last episode, when I watched him in the Avengers, which is the first time I had seen him because I didn't see this. I saw the Avengers before I saw this movie. I was like, oh, so it's just Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the point, casting him. It was supposed to be like his redemption. You get to see his redemption on screen.
Yeah.
Right.
It just sort of happens.
Art
that way.
imitates life, imitates art.
Sure.
Yeah, so, but he does a good job, and he's a great actor. And I really loved when...
He looks the part, for sure.
I love the scene when Gwyneth Paltrow has to reach into his chest, and she's like, "Hey, it's all good."
Yeah.
And it's like she's never heard of the game Operation before. Yeah. She was like, "What? What is that?
What is that?"
I know, that was weird.
Well, I guess they don't have it on Goop, so
maybe.
She's all about the Goop these days. Yeah,
that's like one of those things that they won't really show stuff like that in the Marvel universe anymore. They don't really do such gross out stuff like that, you won't see like strippers in the Marvel universe or like
he has strippers on his plane.
It was a little jarring for me, some of that stuff. Or like I said, how he was like just talking to women in the beginning, because I felt like that doesn't really continue on in the other Marvel movies I've seen.
Yeah, and there's more talk of sex or whatever in this movie than you'll ever see again, probably in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, there is a sex scene in the movie.
Yeah. And I don't think it ever happened again. Like there was ever another movie where there was a sex scene.
Well, they made such a big deal of the love scene in Eternals. It's like, oh, there's a Marvel. It's like, well, but he had sex with Leslie Bibb in this movie.
Yeah,
It was, and it was very clear what was happening. I mean, it wasn't like a full on like we're just going to watch them have sex.
Right. It wasn't like our rating, but yeah. I liked that his social security number is 5. I thought that was good.
Yeah, he must have he was literally the fifth person to get a social security number. All right. Any other thoughts? Any other things you want to say?
He doesn't care about destroying his own stuff. I said that. Does he have air conditioning in his suit? I have so many questions about the suit. Does he have air conditioning?
I think he does.
He must have some sort of like climate control, because then he goes up into the atmosphere and stuff.
Yeah. I don't know about air conditioning. I think it's been established that there is a bathroom, though. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
I feel like that's been mentioned.
You find out in the second movie that it collects urine.
It's like a spacesuit.
Yeah, it like filters things.
I would be remiss if I didn't point this out, because, as I said in the previous episode, the only thing I knew about Iron Man before the Marvel movies started coming out was one episode of Seinfeld where he's mentioned, and I didn't even know who Iron Man was. And the thing they're talking about in Seinfeld is, does he wear underwear in his suit? And it did seem like he had some sort of bodysuit on. So I guess we got that question answered.
Yeah, probably something more reasonable than like what Peter Parker wears in the Spider-Man movies, because in the Spider-Man movies...
There's nothing left to the imagination. He must not have anything under there.
Well, like in the Spider-Man movies, he's wearing boxers under his suit. He takes off his suit and he's wearing boxers, and I'm like, that's insane.
Not practical.
Talk about suspending your disbelief.
Yeah.
Right?
But they sure do love to show Tom Holland in those boxers.
Yeah, they do. It's now in like every movie. It's just like, why do we need this? I get why we're getting that, but it's not necessary for the story. And he's still in high school.
Yeah. Kind of gross.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, so that wraps up our discussion of Iron Man, the original Iron Man.
Ooh.
And now we're going to discuss the film that we will be doing in our next episode. Are you guys excited for this?
So excited.
Are you excited because you don't remember what it's going to be?
Yes, I don't remember. I never remember what the next movie is going to be. Tell us.
We do plan these movies maybe 3 to 4 movies in advance.
Yeah.
Like we talk about it ahead of time.
Jonathan,
but me and Max always forget.
Yeah, Jonathan even usually tells me like the day of what the next movie is going to be, and by the time we get here, I've always forgotten it.
So me and Max are always surprised. And me and Max are usually the ones that haven't seen the movies before too.
It's true.
So we're always like, ooh, what's coming?
Yeah, and that's why all 3 of us are necessary to this process.
We will eventually get to a movie that like I have seen that Jonathan hasn't. It will happen eventually
someday.
on this podcast.
It will. It's going to be a little while though. Our next film, drum roll please.
is V for Vendetta.
Woo!
Okay, now this is one that Jennifer and I have not seen.
And
This will
Max
be
has
the first
seen.
movie we've discussed on this podcast that I have not, and I have seen nothing about it. I know it's got like Natalie Portman is in it.
Yes, Natalie Portman is in it.
Is it with Jean Reno, or am I thinking of a different one?
I don't remember who actually plays V.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's something to do with Guy Fawkes Day. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of the plot of the movie.
Other than that, I don't know anything about it. I know there's
Yeah.
a mask.
Yep.
Yeah,
I know that
that's-
when it came out, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, that is not for Jonathan.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what Max loves about this movie. And how about you, Jennifer? What do you know about it?
the same, which is nothing. So I know I remember like the poster, I think, of it with the guy in the white Guy Fawkes mask.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's like, for some reason I had in my head he was like a vampire. That's probably very wrong, but that's what I had in my head.
Yeah, no, this movie, I don't think this movie is what either of you thinks it is. It's actually
Okay.
it's actually one of my personal favorite movies. If I had to be asked what's your favorite, maybe like not Marvel movie, I would have to say it's V for Vendetta.
Well, we don't want you to spoil any of it for us. So we know that this is Max's favorite. This movie is available to stream on HBO Max. You can also rent it on Apple TV or Amazon Prime Video. Once again, we will always see these movies with an appropriate viewing experience. We don't steal anything. We don't torrent anything. We always pay for what we watch.
There were no pirates in Iron Man, and so there are no pirates on this podcast.
Yes,
Right.
we will. This is the hill we've chosen to die on. Is that we will always make sure that the people that make these movies get their 10 cents from us.
Yeah, and we're also trying to make sure that they are easily available to most people. I mean, I don't even own a DVD player, so if we do get to something that's not available on any service, I don't know what we'll do at that point. But so far they're pretty easy to find. Most movies are easy to find. So we're going to try to make sure that the movies we do on the podcast are pretty readily available for anyone to watch.
Okay, so tune in to our next episode for V for Vendetta. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interesting things to say. But this is going to be it for us for this episode. My name is Jonathan, and I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you for liking and subscribing, and thanks for reaching out on our social media pages. Thank you for downloading the podcast. We really appreciate that. We're really excited about the response we've gotten so far, and we hope that you'll tell your friends, and we'll get to grow our audience. And I'll hand it over to my co-host to say goodbye.
And if there's any movie that like people give you crap for not having seen and you want to just get around to watching it, even if you don't think you're going to like it, but want to talk about it on our podcast, please reach out to us. We'd love to have more guests. We had one guest already. It was fabulous. So we'd love to have more guests. Everybody's got that one movie that they just kind of missed. And that's kind of the point of this podcast. No judgment from us. Even if it's one of our favorite movies, we don't judge because obviously we have not seen a lot of movies too.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank
you, and good night.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
What Do You Mean You've Never Seen is written by Jonathan Colon. Theme song and editing by Maxwell Abelman. Cover art by James Alexander. Your hosts are Jonathan Colon, Jennifer Branch, and Max Abelman. Please visit whatdoyoumeanyou'veneverseen.buzzsprout.com for more great episodes and links to our social media and Patreon pages. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the movies.